Welcome to the Trauma Overhaul Podcast. It seems like it has been forever since we've been with you guys, but we took much needed time to rest and relax. And we're back and we're ready for season 2. And today we're going to be talking about something that may hit kind of deep. We're going to be talking about something that shakes the foundation of a lot of relationships right now, as we can see that the divorce rate is very high right now in the United States. And so this can even affect your sense of self and your identity. So, what are we talking about today? We're talking about betrayal trauma and the act of infidelity. So, whether you've been betrayed, whether you made the mistake yourself, or you may be supporting someone through this aftermath. So, this episode is going to be about healing, not just surviving, but finding your way back to clarity, back to wholeness, and back to trust. Now, that's whether that's going to be within your relationship or whether that is within yourself. So, we'll unpack the emotional roller coaster. We're going to talk about those tough questions that you've always wondered about. What are some of the triggers for the behavior? And most importantly, what is the path to move forward? But I will say it's not easy, but it's possible. So, with all of that being said, let's take a deep breath and we're going to dive right in. And today, I am your host, Tiffany Singleton.
And I'm your co-host, Aaliyah Simon.
And we have a very special guest, Ms. Chandra Brown, who is a licensed clinical social worker. Welcome to the show, Chandra.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you
Yes,
so much.
you are welcome. And we're just going to pause for a second. If you'll just let the audience know a little bit about your background and what is it that you do?
Well, like you said, I am a licensed clinical social worker. I have been in the field for 20 years. One of the areas that I spend a lot of time is with marriage and families and couples. And so that is one of my favorite areas to focus on when it comes to clinical treatment. And so I actually have a podcast called The Chase Lounge where I focus solely on relationships. And so today I wanted to share some thoughts about infidelity. Tiffany invited me to come to the show and I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to dive right in. As we do with most of our episodes, we do not assume that everyone knows the difference between infidelity and adultery. So, what is that difference, Chandra?
Well, adultery has to do with a married couple, and it has to do with having an affair or an extramarital relationship, is my understanding of adultery. Infidelity is simply put is being unfaithful to an identified partner.
And so, what are some of the triggers, or what do you think are some of the common root causes of infidelity in relationships based on your experience?
Some of the root causes, it can vary. A lot of times, the way that I like to describe it often is that relationships already have a lot going on. We call it the marriage is sick before the affair happened or before infidelity occurs. And so it could be unmet. It could be actually the perceived thought that I'm entitled to have multiple relationships. Like this is my God-given right to do what I want to. And so it could be learned behavior from our parents. And just there's a lot of social norms and pressures that also feed into infidelity. Or what I also think of as the lack of respect for relationships and commitment.
Let's talk about, I'm the childhood trauma one over here.
Okay.
So, how can unresolved childhood trauma contribute to patterns of behaviors in adults?
So I think that if unresolved trauma is a factor, then sometimes we go in looking for things, or we actually, when things are really good, we create not necessarily trauma or drama, but sometimes we're looking for something. So we want them to prove something to us, or we're trying to prove like it can't be good. And so sometimes we can do more damage than good. And we can have certain behaviors can put us in the mindset and put us in that unsafe space that we once felt before. Other relationships that we've been in where there's been infidelity or unfaithfulness, then that also can put us in that headspace, if you will.
Attachment styles. How does that work?
So when you think about attachment styles, let's look at the anxious. Like I said, again, that individual is wanting you to prove that you care about them potentially, right? So they may not even cheat, but they may behave in ways that look like they are having an affair just to kind of get a reaction out of the person, right? To demonstrate that you care about me. So that may be one. The avoidant, again, if things are going really well, they don't like that feeling of vulnerability. And so there's this, it's too good to be true. The bottom's going to fall out. It's not going to work. And so being vulnerable is not a space where they want to be. And so they may have an affair or begin to engage in behavior that's very similar to an affair. And then most likely, and this is my opinion, if you're talking about secure attached, they're least likely because they can set boundaries, they can do all the things. And if they do, it is a choice that they have already kind of ended the relationship and maybe haven't verbalized that, but they have in some way ended that relationship for themselves.
Okay. So can someone cheat and still love their partner?
Absolutely. Again, I'll go back to the earlier statement. Oftentimes, infidelity, cheating, this type of betrayal has little to do with love. It has more to do with either a need not being met, problems in the relationship, some insecurities that are internal to the individual, but it's not about love or lack of love. Oftentimes, they can be very much in love with their partner, but still cheat.
Okay.
Right. And so that is opportunistic infidelity, where there is no emotional connection, but it's kind of just the act, just because something presents itself. So it's like, I just want to see if I still got it, or I'm going to just try this out, or I'm going to do this because I'll probably never get caught, so that's doing something just for fun. But another common type, like you said, is the romantic infidelity. And that's the tough one because that's where there is sex involved and there is a strong emotional connection that results from the affair and the relationship. So that makes it a little bit tougher. Now, both are unfair in relationship, but having that emotional attachment is tough.
So, Tiffany, and when I'm hearing you, I'm also hearing gender differences, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we have, especially historically, we have a perceived notion that men would fall into that category of opportunistic, right? This idea of, oh, I was out with the guys or whatever, and it just happened. I fell into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but women all in these days and in this time, women are also doing some of that behavior as well. But I think that then that's going back to what I was saying before is this God-given right? As a man, I don't have to. It's okay. It's acceptable, right? For me to have multiple women. As long as I take care of home, what I do outside of the home shouldn't matter, right? And so there's this idea that I'm entitled to that type. It's okay. And women growing up somewhat believe that they don't, like I said, women believe that that's what men are going to do. And so they go into a lot of relationships not thinking if it's going to happen, but when it's going to happen. So they already have this mindset like it's an expectation that their partner is going to cheat. But that can set up the relationship for failure.
Yes.
It set up those problems already occurring before it happens, right? Because you're looking for something. You're looking for certain behaviors, and oftentimes you'll find exactly what you're looking for, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And that kind of also, Chandra, it leads me back again to what Aaliyah was saying with that childhood trauma. If there are abandonment issues from a childhood, sometimes someone to find themselves self-sabotaging a relationship because
Yes.
they're like, this is too good to be true, or I'm waiting for this other shoe to drop. So
Yes.
instead of being disappointed or
Mhm.
feeling like eventually they're going to do something to leave me, I'm going to do something to cause this to tear apart.
Because I don't want to feel that pain. I don't want to
Yes.
feel that hurt, right?
Yes.
And I know that it's coming.
Yes.
I know that it's coming. And so if I initiate it, then it hurts less
Yes.
Mhm.
Mhm.
because it's going to come.
So we're talking about like the romantic infidelity. Are there other types of infidelity in relationships?
Yes. So definitely, the most common one is the sexual or romantic infidelity. But the one that typically falls into the category that women get labeled as is having an emotional affair. It's that emotional connectedness that they have with someone else. And you'll hear it sometimes called my work wife or my work husband, right? And although that's cute on the front end, what is that really about and how deep does that really go, right? Is that an after hour relationship or is it solely just at work, right? A lot of times those type of relationships and bonds become emotional affairs. Not always, but that's a affair that is happening where you are, and oftentimes it will also lead to a sexual relationship or has the tendency to. Not guaranteed, but it sometimes do. The other one is cyber, and that is having, and they may not have even met the person, but they have an ongoing relationship with this person now, and they have desires to want to be with this person, maybe even fantasize about being with this person. But their committed partner doesn't know anything about that person. And then getting back to from a trauma perspective, that perceived affairs, right? So it's those that idea that you're doing everything but cheating, right? And sometimes you're even doing things that are actually another form of infidelity, like financial infidelity or bad mouthing your partner. And that's kind of where those emotional fears can sometimes tie into. It's everything but the breach of contract or sexual contact with someone. And so, and sometimes it's nothing at all. It's just you are behaving in ways that are not consistent with the relationship.
I was studying something the other day, and it's not anything unknown, but now it has a label. It's called micro cheating. And so that is keeping communications, like if you're married, but you want to still engage in communication with your ex
Mm.
without your spouse knowing that, doing flirty things with people from your past, changing up your behavior just to attract somebody's attention, and trying to downplay different relationship statuses with people that you probably shouldn't be involved in once you're in a committed married relationship. So those are considered micro cheating, but to most people, they might not see that as cheating because it's like, well, we haven't slept together or we're not doing anything. So I think it's important, even with that, in any relationship, you identify or have a discussion. Hey, what is your definition of cheating? What's a non negotiable for you, right? Because that's where we also come into problems with close friends or best friends of the opposite sex, which can also fall into that category if we're not careful. So, what do you ladies think? Do you think that it's possible for somebody to have a truly platonic friendship with somebody of the opposite sex when you're married? And I know it's up to each individual couple to make that decision, but what is your personal thoughts on that?
Rumor has it that women can have platonic relationships, but that men only have women they haven't slept with yet. And so it just depends on how you want to view it. So to me, that's one and the same thing, right?
Mhm.
Because you have to be, I like what you said, going back, you have to define for us as a couple,
That's right.
right? Because
Mhm.
for someone, it could be talking to your ex, even if you share a child, if I don't know about the communication,
Mhm.
then that's cheating or flirting with the waitress, whatever that is. right? But you have to define what that is. But really, it's about betraying the relationship, being unfaithful, doing things that you would not do if your partner was there, is how I define it. So if you are engaging in behavior that you would not engage in if your partner was there, you probably need to think about, is this the right thing to do?
Oh, that's
right?
good. Yep, you have to hide it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, it is, and that reminds me of, once the affair has happened, right?
Mhm.
There's this idea of privacy versus secrecy. And anything that is secrecy,
Ooh.
right,
Mhm.
is a no-go.
That's good.
Privacy, even if you are the person that committed the act, you did the wrong, you are still entitled to some level of privacy, right? But there cannot be secrecy, right? So an example is, and this has to be within the relationship, but like checking text messages or whatever the case may be, or sharing passwords, all of those things. I think that you have the right to privacy, but not secrecy. So if you are deleting things, if you are hiding things, that's secrecy.
Mm-hmm.
Having a password is privacy, and you're entitled to that.
Okay.
So do you think that like the affair happened and now what if they are like, okay, a part of the conditions of you and I working through this thing is that I want to check your phone whenever I feel like I want to. Would that be an issue, or is that crossing the line between privacy and secrecy? Because the phone was the issue in the first place.
So, and it is all between that and the Facebook DMs or any kind of social media. So yes, the phone is the issue. And I would say this, it really does depend on the couple and their commitment to making this relationship work. But I would also ask you, to what end? Because what I would offer you is this, is that if I'm not going to give you my password, but if we're sitting there and you're saying to me, and we're having open and honest communication, and you say, I'm feeling some kind of way, or this has been on my mind, or do you mind showing me your Facebook DMs, or do you mind showing, do you mind me going through your phone? And you open your phone and give it to the person, right? Without saying, okay, wait a minute, I'm gonna give it to you. And then you go in to the bathroom and make sure there's nothing in there, right? Before you give it to them, right? Being able to have your privacy, right? Put in your code and hand your phone over to someone should be an acceptable behavior. But I shouldn't have to give you mine so that you can go through it whenever you want to, because then that's a breach of my privacy. Just like you going through my phone and not telling me that you're going through my phone is a breach of my privacy.
So now that we're actually talking about, okay, the affair happened, okay, what are some of the trauma responses people experiencing after discovering the infidelity?
So I would say some of the first things they do is kind of, one, create an image in their head of what happened. They have a storyline of what they think happened, and they're going through the details, and they want to know all of the details. They may have hard time sleeping. They may not eat. They may cry a lot. All of these symptoms, being anxious, just totally outside of who they are, irritable, all of those behaviors that you might see with some PTSD type of behavior, right? Because everything that they knew to be true is no longer true. It's no longer safe. You're no longer who I thought you were. This relationship wasn't exactly what I thought it was. can I even trust my own judgment? What did I miss? How did I? So everything has been shattered. And so they may be going through a gambit of symptoms.
Mhm. Yeah. And I want
Okay.
to add to that just a lot of anger and rage for some people. It can impact self esteem, self worth, lead to fears of abandonment and rejection. And like you said,
Mhm.
a lot of different intrusive thinking, intrusive thoughts constantly.
If I have dormant or things that I thought I worked through, abandonment issues and all the different things that I had going in my life, and then all of a sudden I find this safe place, which is my husband, and then that is shattered. How does that play into it? Would it be a greater shattering or it's the same thing as anybody else?
I would say if you had truly worked through it, you're going to have a relapse, right? And you're going to feel a lot of that same feelings or experiences will come rushing back, right? Whatever that was for you from that past trauma, some of that is going to come back and exacerbate what is going on right now, right? It's going to make it even worse. And that's even if you have done the work, right? Because there's, again, there's still going to be some shattering of your reality. But if you haven't done the work, then this person could completely either shut down or meaning like they just can't function, right? They just can't function, and or they will totally act as if nothing happened. And so it really just depends on how you respond, what your coping skills are, because they can totally avoid the hurt that they are experiencing because they don't want to deal with it right now because it's too much. It's overwhelming.
I'm totally in agreement with what Chandra just said that it can exacerbate it. It can make it worse, especially if that previous trauma has not even been dealt with. So when you have abandonment wounds, those are feelings of feeling unprotected, unloved, rejected. That's a resounding theme in somebody's life. So as we know, that's a whole process that has to be navigated and walked through when you're trying to heal something like that. So, in most cases, that's going to require professional therapy where you can actually be walked through that process to one, recognize the wound. There's a process of reconnecting with your inner child. There's a space where, when it's time to create emotional safety, and giving yourself what you did not get in those relationships. And so we refer to that in the therapy world as reparenting yourself. And so as you heal and you move through healing those different types of wounds, then you'll find yourself now knowing what secure relationships look like, being able to identify that and being able to create those in spaces in your life moving forward.
So we got a question to throw in there.
Okay. Yeah.
So, say for instance, you decided to move on with the relationship and you so-called dealt with the infidelity and your partner and you are moving forward. And then, but you haven't done any of the real work, you just kind of move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden you start doing the work on yourself. And then you realize, uh-oh, I probably should not have stayed or I should not have done this. What do you suggest to somebody in that category who's like, who did not do the work, but then eventually did the work and found out that they should not have stayed with this person, or because this person it wasn't just like a mistake, it's
Right.
like a pattern of behavior.
Right. So every circumstance is different, but I would say if that person is walking or on their journey of healing, then they do have some decisions to make. And if they decide to end the relationship, I think that that's okay. I think that that is healthy because you got to take care of you, right? Because he or she won't be able to, if you know that this person, I call them serial cheaters, right? A serial cheater is not someone you can have a long-term committed healthy relationship with. even if they say they are reformed. They're not going to, there's something there that they have to work through. There's some work that they need to do on their end. But until that is actually done, that's not going to, it may go dormant, but it will always be there until they do their own work. And so you can love somebody, but love them from afar if they're in that kind of situation. Because what it will do in my mind is going to do more damage to you and your healing process if you remain in that relationship once you know that this is not healthy for you.
So what about the individuals who feel like it's their fault that their partner cheated?
No
Let's open
such
that up.
no such thing, because I'm a firm believer that there's a choice, right? You have a choice.
Absolutely.
Again, if you had the little person, your spouse or your partner on your shoulder, and you're like, oh, I wouldn't do that if they were standing right there. You had a choice. You chose to ignore that thought because you, even in the act, you had a thought like, "Ooh, I probably shouldn't have done this, or I probably shouldn't do this." And so that's a choice that they're making to violate the relationship or the conditions of that relationship. And at no point is the person that was betrayed ever at fault for the decision that was made. Actually, the decision, the choice that was taken away from them, right? Because I always say, don't make decisions for me, right? And when you decide to have an affair, you took my decision, you took my choices away, right? And that's not fair. It's not okay to me. So, given that, it can never be their fault. It may feel like it. They may feel inadequate. They may feel like they're not pretty enough. They're not sexy enough. They're not young enough. They're not hot enough. Whatever it is, they may feel all those things. But the reality is this person made a choice to betray the commitment that the two of you set out.
I know that you said earlier that usually the marriage or the relationship is already sick
Yes.
prior to the affair.
Yes.
So where does that play into with the blame game?
So, and it does. So one of the things I would say is you have to take responsibility for your part of the relationship
Yes.
not being well or being sick. You have to take your responsibility for that. But the act in and of itself, you didn't have a choice in. You weren't there and said, yeah, go ahead. You didn't have a choice in that. And so I would say if you are going to remain in the relationship, you have to take responsibility and accountability for your behavior within that relationship, your communication style, if you have explosive anger or if you shut down and you don't communicate,
right,
if you withdraw from the relationship, if you do or engage in behavior where you're not even trying to meet or negotiate the needs of your partner, right? And so you have to take responsibility for that behavior, but the act of itself, no.
right. It's a personal decision, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do want to throw this in because I'm not sure that all infidelity happens because something was brewing at home. Because I've seen all different scenarios in practice. It can be where there's not much brewing at home, but someone does not know how to deal with someone that they're very attracted to in the workspace. They're with that person 8 hours a day, pretty much more than they are with someone at home. So then there becomes an inappropriate attachment in that environment. Someone can be out at a restaurant just dining by themselves, and someone that they're highly attracted to can come over to the table, and there starts some form of communication, exchange of numbers, and something inappropriate grows out of that. So just want to make sure that we're clear that sometimes it does not just begin because there's red flags or signals of things going on at home. Sometimes it's just a lack of not having and respecting boundaries when we meet different types of people. We have to all realize that we're human. There is somebody that, if we want to be honest, each of us, if you see somebody from your past or there's a certain prototype that if they walk into your space for a minute, you might have to like clutch your pearls for a second, right? I mean, let's be real about it, right? It's the
So,
same for males and females.
so I can meet all of the Jason Momoas or whatever his name is
Yeah,
of the world and think he hot and sexy. But if I'm in a relationship with John and I can't share with John that, hey, I met this person, was attracted to them,
mhm,
right?
right.
Then at what point? So again, you begin to deceive and be secret and begin to hide things. If you are exchanging numbers, oh, it's okay to give Jason Momoa your number as long as John knows that I did that. Now, if I'm not doing that, then that is a decision. And what's going on in our relationship that's creating a distance that I can't share that kind of information because that's a new entry point into our relationship.
That's correct. Right. And so that's what I'm stating, that nothing could really be going on bad at home. It's just that I have my cake and I want to eat it too, and I want to see if I can get away with it without anybody seeing crumbs around my mouth. That's what that is, right? Yeah. And so if I feel like I can get away with it, then I'm probably not going to tell my spouse, but I still love them. Let's be real. That's how people really process that.
But what and you're absolutely right. I believe that that is how people process it, but I don't know that that's a healthy relationship, is what I'm getting after.
It's not. That's why we're talking about cheating. So I'm giving
Yeah.
another scenario of how infidelity can come into a marriage without things going wrong at home. Yeah, I'm not at all saying that's right. Which is why I also said that's a violation of a boundary for the marriage, right? Which
Mhm.
leads to the infidelity.
So I also think that in some marriages, you have what appears to be everything is going well,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
They're dating, they're going on vacations, they're doing all the things that healthy relationships do.
right.
And when the other person steps out, it may not have been because you could literally see, you can see is something you can actually see or put your fingers on that something is happening. But to me, when I think about it, something had to be there, whether it's something going on with you as an individual, some unhealed things, some thinking you just need to do it because of whatever, because of societal pressures,
Right.
whatever. It might not have been something specifically about your partner or what they're doing or not doing. It could be something. So I think that's what I mean when I'm thinking something is already there in order for
Mhm.
you to do it.
Right.
Because if I'm healthy and I'm a secure, attached person, and I've decided to be with this person over here, and they feel the same way, and we're doing all the things that keep relationships alive and well and
Mhm.
robust, and then you still step out, there is something there that is unmet, and that unmet can be imagined or not, whether it's
Mhm.
unmet from your partner or unmet in their imagination. They still something. I don't just think that guys or girls just go out and just whatever. I think there is something that
Yes.
that makes them more susceptible to doing stuff like this.
And with that,
Mhm.
I would argue that a lot of times it has to do with intimacy and the levels of intimacy, right? And it
Mm.
could, my ability, if I have a sexual desire that we've talked about on the surface,
Right.
right? But the way that you respond to just the general surface conversation lets me know if it's safe enough to talk to you about this.
Mhm.
And if that is a need that I may have,
Mhm.
I'm not going to engage in that conversation with you because it's not safe. Because I already, in the surface, the general conversation, there's judgment and it feels unsafe. And so again, I stick to, unless the only time I find that that's not the case is with serial cheaters, people that just cheat for the sake of cheating because they can, because it was available. When you talked about the opportunistic cheater, that's the ones that I feel like do that kind of behavior, engage in that. But I feel like there is something underneath, beneath the surface, almost always, I would even say always, in a so-called healthy relationship when an affair occurs. There's something there that is not being addressed or talked about. I will say this, every couple that I've ever worked with and an infidelity has occurred, and on the outside, everybody thought that they were the best couple. Mm-hmm. When we started peeling back the layers, mm-hmm. there were things there that they were not addressing that led to that breach.
Absolutely. Yeah. I am in total agreement. We can't put every situation into one group. I've seen it all different ways. So with that being said, what are some disagreements or some conflicting places in a marriage that you see that are often not addressed that can lead to this behavior?
Oftentimes, what I have seen is it has to do with, like I said, levels of intimacy, those sexual desires and needs. There's some of that, or lack of intimacy, right? The ability to be vulnerable with someone, because that is an uncomfortable space. The other thing that I would say is not feeling or being put first, because when you fail to put someone first in that relationship, and it's, you know, that commitment, level of commitment, that opens the door for someone else to take notice and see that you're not getting that. What I would say oftentimes too, when women make a man not feel like a man. So there, you know, there's things like that. And so there are those things that are hard to have a conversation about. It's hard to have a conversation if I am a masculine man, but I want these types of behaviors in the bedroom or whatever, or I want you to perform these types of behaviors in the bedroom, and you already shut me down before we can even have a conversation. Those are things that oftentimes or they even see the way that they're raised, that, hey, that is not what a wife does. That is what these type of women do. And so they have made it okay to do that outside of the home, but not with the mother of their children. And so but I can't have a conversation with you about that. So they don't.
That's interesting, because in most cases, I think most couples do premarital counseling. And so it makes me wonder, what is the depth of the premarital counseling if we don't have that information up front, right? And how important do you feel, in your personal opinion, is premarital counseling before somebody makes that big step?
I honestly, I think it's vital. I think it's one of those things that people take for granted. They don't do it. A lot of Christian communities and churches won't even, like, the pastor wouldn't even marry me before I got married if we didn't do premarital. But it was very surface level. It didn't get after our core values. It didn't get after the major what ifs and how we solve problems, how our anger show up. It didn't really get after a lot of the things that are going to come, like loss, pain, job loss.
That's good.
Not having children or whatever it is, wanting kids, not wanting kids, all of those things. It did talk about some values. It didn't go in depth. And I think that it is important for couples to really explore those things, but not just what may happen, but also explore our family histories of how marriages are within our own personal histories. Like us take a look at 3 generations
Right.
back and see how we fare.
That's good.
You know, how many of them had infidelity or children outside of the marriage? What happened? How did they handle it? How many of them, you know, just how long did they stay together? What kind of relationships? How they solve problems, whatever it is. I think we need to look at that as well as looking at how we want to maybe do things differently, but really exploring it. Not 2 or 3 sessions and, you know, stamp of approval, you've done premarital counseling. It should be in depth.
That's good. And
I couldn't agree more.
yes, I was getting
Um,
ready to say me too. Yes.
Oh my goodness, I couldn't agree more. I remember marriage counseling a little bit, but what I do remember is not going through the in-depth conversations that we should have gone through, the patterns of behaviors in my life, the patterns of behaviors in his life, and plus looking at family life. But just like you said, the value system, what do you value? And not only knowing what you value, but how do you prioritize your values? Because even though you say you value your family, but on what level do you do? You know, like some people, yeah, I value my family, they value their perfect career even more, and
Right.
they'll sacrifice a family
Yeah.
to reach whatever goals they are, because guess what? They may have a value for that family, but it's not before that career. So it's like, can you sustain a relationship when our value systems are not in sequential or in order, if I could say that, but like are totally different? Like in a sense of, yes, we value this, that, and the third. We have these values in place, but the number that you put on something is totally different from where I put it.
That's good.
And I would, Leah, I would even go one step further and say how we define it may
Yeah.
even be different,
Mhm.
right? So when I speak to men, men say that their number one value is family, but they spend all their time on their career, especially the military, right? The military forces them in that space, right? That they have to, but they're doing all of that. They're working hard, trying to be promoted, do everything they need to do for their family so that they can take care of their family. But their wife is saying, hey, I need you here. I need these things. You know, I need you to spend time. I need you to do all of these things with the family if the family's so important. And so how we define it too, what that looks like may also have a impact on where the values are actually placed.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. I think that, like having these conversations prior to getting in these committed relationships is very important because, you know, if you're having conversations about values, you're having conversation about, the vision of your family and where you want your family to be at a certain time in life. I mean, how we have these goals set up. We have career goals, but do you have family goals? Relationship goals with your partner, as well as your goals with your children. I think those things are very, very important. Those type of conversations is very important because even then you can tell the difference between somebody who values or where their value is or where it stacks up as far as where yours is stacked up, like based off of their vision and what they believe their future will look like. It's like a lot of times people tell you exactly how important you are if you just ask them their vision, ask them their goals.
That's
And
right.
if you're
That's good.
not right there with them in that,
Mhm.
then you might not be as important as you think you are in their lives. So, that's just, but those are conversations that are pre-marriage, relationship, how do you say, this partnership or whatever.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, these conversations are so, so important and go beyond just the thought of someone cheating. It's like a lot of times if we could avoid so many things, so many pitfalls in relationships, if we have these really good in-depth conversations, as well as self-awareness,
Mm-hmm.
aware
Mm-hmm.
of who you are
That's right.
what you are, where you're heading, and whether it is in the same trajectory, the same place, same goal your partner is in. I know I just said that, but like it's because they show you who they are. We just don't always listen.
Right.
That 100%. People tell you uh, the thing that I find often in relationships is someone would tell you that they didn't want to have kids, and then you want to have, and then you think you're going to change their mind, or um, that whatever it is, right? They tell you what they want, they tell you who they are on the front end. And so one of the things is that people fall into relationships. They don't, oftentimes we don't have a conversation about, so they call them situationships or whatever, and they just fall into these things. They're spending time with each other, and I call it too building your house upside down, right? So if your house is built with the roof on the bottom, and then you put the values on the top, that foundation, that concrete, which is your values, is going to crush that roof. And so you have to flip it. So oftentimes we build our house upside down and we wonder why it's failing. It's failing because you did all the fun stuff, the things that don't matter, and you didn't talk about the real stuff, your core values, the things that are important, the things that are going to sustain this relationship and allow it to weather any storm. But if you don't build your house right, it's bound to get tore up in a tornado. And a tornado is an affair. A tornado is the loss of a parent or a child or things of that nature. And if your house wasn't built, and although those things are big enough to tear down any house, but if it wasn't built on the right foundation, it definitely is going to tear that house apart.
Yes.
And I need to add this because we're Christian here. And when we're talking about foundationally, I want to make sure that we make sure the spiritual piece of the covenant is intact as well, because we cannot sustain or build anything if it's not built on solid Christian foundations, the Lord Jesus Christ. You know, what does the word of God say about covenant and marriage and leaving and cleaving to your wife and respecting each other in love and all of those other principles that are core foundational measures to make sure that you fireproof or attempt to fireproof the marriage, right? And so if that's missing, and I think on an earlier episode, Aaliyah talked about the 3-strand cord. So if we're only dealing with 2 strands and we're missing the core third strand, then we already have a problem. So I think it's also important that one, we understand fully before we get into a marriage, what exactly is that? What was it designed for? What does it mean for the both of us? I know every relationship is different. But in this instance, what does that mean? And why are we doing this? Making sure we are solid in why we're moving forward in what we're moving in. And another piece that I think is important when we talked about backgrounds and backdrops of people's lives is how many people have literally discussed traumatic past with their significant other prior to that. Even if it was missed in the premarital process, have we taken time now, regardless of how long we've been married, to have those discussions? Because we find that it explains a lot of behaviors that we may have been wondering about, like why does she respond like that, or why is she always yelling, or why does he shut down every time I try to address something with him, right? So that's where we have to really really now know people's core historical background and know who and what we're actually connecting ourselves to.
You are absolutely right. Because, like, if you think about it, whatever we're used to as a kid, the environment, a lot of times we go after and put ourselves in the same situations of that environment that we're used to. We're just like they say, a female always looks for their dad, right? So if your dad was this, and that, then you end up with a man just like that, then you wonder why. It's like, because I tried my best not to, I wanted the opposite of who my father was, but then I found this man here, but he fit the story or the emotional story that you've always been in. Does that make
Yes,
sense? Like
yes.
this framework, I went and found somebody that can play the role of what I'm used to, how I'm used to feeling unworthy, inadequate, not enough. So I went and found somebody that can come into my life now and can make me feel the same exact way because that's what I'm used to.
Yes. Familiarity. Yes.
Yes. And if you're not aware of that framework that you have already, you are doomed to repeat it over and over and over again with different relationships. And you wonder why people jump ship so much. They're jumping ship because, man, why do I keep getting in these relationships? Why? Because you're not aware yet. You're not aware of the framework that you have and how you're just inviting people to play roles so you can stay within that framework. It's not until you begin to move out of that and become self-aware that you're like, you can really make some different changes and attract people from those changes and not from your original framework. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's familiarity because I've had people say, "Well, I know this might be healthier over here and I know this person really would love me and they treat me nice, but I don't understand that, but I know how to navigate this crazy over here. I know how to, even though it's dysfunctional, I know this level over here, and I'm more comfortable staying here than moving over to the healthy space." And so you'll see that a lot if that trauma is not dealt with. Yeah, and it will show up. Listen, I need to pause to say this. Marriage does not fix brokenness. Marriage
Say
does
it
not
again.
fix insecurities. It will multiply it.
It
Trust
Yes.
me.
exacerbates
I
it.
see it
Absolutely.
every
Yes.
week. It will magnify it.
Oh,
So
It
please,
definitely does. And
yes.
and you have to do the work.
yes, you
You
have to
have to
do
be
it.
willing to do the work.
Yes.
And it's not easy work.
No.
And the thing about whether it's past trauma
Yes.
or it is the betrayal that you just experienced, you have to do the work. And it's funny when Aaliyah was talking, what also reminds me of, we lie to ourselves. We lie to ourselves all the time.
Hmm.
We lie what we want. And then you want somebody that's available and all of that stuff, but you end up picking somebody and it shows up in different ways.
Right.
That emotionally unavailable person, right? It shows up in different ways.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, like you said, you put yourself back in that space. We lie to ourselves about what we're doing, what not doing, what we are willing to accept, what we are not going to accept. And that hurts us. But if you're honest with yourself and begin doing the work, you can get there.
That's good.
And having a or not having a relationship at all is healthier than having a relationship that hurts you every day, that you feel
Mm.
alone
Yes.
at
Ooh,
the end of
yes.
the day.
Yes.
That's right.
So I'd rather you take the time, because what I find, especially in couples and mainly in men, they hop from one relationship to the next, never taking the time to discover what went wrong, what they could do differently, how they can engage better, and they're just filling that void. They don't want to feel that, they don't want to feel it, so they fill it with another person. And they continue to do
Mm.
that over and over again and wonder why the relationships pretty much end the same way all the time.
Yes.
But it's everybody else's fault now.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
It's
everybody else's fault. There's
Hey,
nothing wrong with me.
yeah, you are the
Nothing.
common
I,
denominator.
I'm a good person. I took care of this. I pay that.
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
this. I do
Hmm.
that. Right. And so we
Yeah.
go in, thinking that we can change people, and that's men and
That's
women.
good. Yes.
Hmm.
Oh,
They
that's
think they can change, but people don't change much unless they're willing to do the work. You can't do it for them. They have to do it.
right. Yeah. And that's why communication is vital
It
to
is.
Yes.
healthy communication is vital
Yes.
to any relationship. So I would say get to a space. What is healthy? I think couples should get to a space where you do become comfortable speaking to your spouse, your partner, right? Opening up those communications. I know if you were somebody that always shut down when somebody asked you questions, I think it's okay to just be honest about that.
Mhm.
Hey, babe, when I was growing up, I didn't have a voice. My family didn't let me speak a lot, so I'm not comfortable expressing myself in words. So will you be patient with me? That's a conversation. That's giving somebody insight as to why you shut down instead of them getting frustrated saying, well, I ain't gonna say nothing because every time I talk to him, he just don't say nothing or he just shut down. Well, now you're helping the person understand why. And so
Right.
now you can navigate that together.
Yeah. And I get the understanding the why,
Yeah.
but that sometimes people weaponize that why
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
and make you feel like you're being a horrible person because look, I'm being patient with you
Right.
and everything else, but you running this thing out. Like I'm being patient, but where's your part in this right here? Like,
Right, right.
you
Uh,
know,
Okay, so
So
how do we not weaponize? What is the healthy thing to do with that information? Because we all about solution.
I agree with you. It's about having those hard conversations, being able to talk about it, but also being able to say, okay, when might you be ready? When are you going to be ready to talk? Because you saying when things are heated, I just need to go and be by myself and I can't talk when I'm that upset or whatever. Okay, when will you? Because you still have to talk about it. I understand not talking about it in the
Yeah,
moment,
right.
but do you need a couple of hours? Do you need a day? Do you need a week? But not having the conversation is not an option. We
Right.
still have to talk about it.
That's
And
correct.
so I understand your history. I understand what has happened to you and how it impacts your ability to have these kind of conversations, but it does not prevent you from having these types of conversations. And so being willing to go all the way through, not just get to the point of saying, I don't want to have it or I don't like having it because of this, but saying, I need time and maybe give me a day, maybe give me 2 weeks, maybe not 2 weeks. That's way too long, but maybe give me a day and being ready. And you have to be patient. You can't chase them and ask them and
Mhm.
keep, but if they're still not ready when they say they're ready, then give them a little bit more time. But to not have the conversation or not talk about the issue is not okay.
Oh, absolutely not. So, how can I, as a spouse, be supportive in that? That's kind of where I want to go with that because we are working as a team. And if I'm telling you I don't know how to do it because I've never done it, I'm not necessarily avoiding the conversation, but what can I do as a spouse to help you feel safe so that you will open up to me?
I think asking what makes them feel safe is
yeah,
important.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
I think asking that question or
Yeah.
what part of this are you willing to talk about? What's, okay.
Yeah.
But like Aaliyah said, sometimes people will weaponize it. So you begin to see the
Mhm.
types of patterns that will pop up as well if they just are avoiding having the conversation.
Mhm.
If they are truly struggling with that, you hopefully are patient and can see some of that and you can help them with that. And like I said, asking them what parts, are comfortable, what are they comfortable with talking about? I think starting there is a good spot and a very supportive way of being as a spouse. Oftentimes I think, the longer people are with each other, they assume they know what they're thinking. They do a lot of mind reading,
Yeah.
and that breaks down communication. And that's what I was saying about on the surface, everything still looks healthy and good,
Yeah.
but really there's some resentment that is developing and brewing in a relationship because, he left his shoes there or she left that there to piss me off. They, because, it begins to do
Yeah.
those types of things that
Mhm.
and then it just builds up and then they move on, but it's still there, it's still under the surface brewing. That person doesn't respect me, you know. The other thing that you said too, and I'm now I'm going off on a different tangent, I'm sorry, but
It's
you
okay. I'm
said
gonna edit.
about the
I'm gonna edit.
foundations because men require respect
That's right.
Women require love.
Mm,
Yeah.
And so that's why when you make a man not feel like a man, oftentimes you lose that man.
right.
And when a woman, when you don't give her love, when she is not loved, that can put the relationship at risk. But
Yeah.
it's about loving, you love women and you respect men.
What are
Yeah.
some signs that a couple is truly ready to do the work to repair after the betrayal and move forward?
So the number one thing is both parties have to commit to doing the work. The affair or the extramarital relationship has to have ended. You would think that that's a no-brainer, but that is not always the case.
Mhm.
But that relationship has to be ended, and it needs to be clear to the betrayed partner that that relationship is ended. Setting the boundaries, being able to discuss openly and honestly about what behaviors are okay, what behaviors are kind of, because like I said, the person could be not doing anything, but you do a behavior that's very similar to behaviors that were the breadcrumbs of the betrayal,
Mhm.
and you put that person back in that space again. And so, what are those ones that are kind of risky that you might not be doing anything, but having that open dialogue about expectations and what the needs are and the boundaries, I think is important. Willing to go to therapy, number one, also, because Aaliyah shared the story about moving beyond, but not really doing the work on the relationship. They haven't really did the therapy thing.
Mhm.
I think that at least on the front end, is a vital part of the healing process when it comes to infidelity.
Sometimes I run into people who they've done the work of going to therapy and things of that nature, but they're having the most difficult time with the trust part. They do
Mm.
not trust their partner as far as they can throw them. So it's like I'm forgiven, forgiven, but it's just this thing like I cannot go beyond believing now that you've shown me something different. Like at one time, the person probably didn't think that this was possible, but
Right.
now that it was possible, now you know this person is capable of doing it. They no longer trust that person.
Mhm.
How do you move in direction where you're continuously trying to make your marriage work when there is absolutely no trust there?
I would ask, I don't think it's possible to healthily do so. And I would ask that person, have they forgiven themselves? You have forgiven your partner, but have you forgiven yourself? And the reason why I would ask them that is because there's a part of ourselves that we feel like we betrayed ourselves when the affair happened, because how did we not know? How did we not see it? How did we not? And so, are you able to forgive yourself for letting yourself down? Because that's what's preventing you from being able to trust. Because if your partner is engaging in behavior that is untrustworthy now, because forgiveness is about not holding it against you, doesn't mean that I forget it.
Yeah.
I just can't hold it against you anymore. And
Right.
so, if I'm holding something against you, then I haven't really forgiven you. Um,
Mm.
and so, and that's what I'm saying. That person is hyper vigilant about the possibility of it happening again because they haven't forgiven themselves, in my mind, and what I'm thinking.
That because so marriage used to be something else, right? It used to be this survival mechanism for women. Let's be honest. We couldn't get houses, we couldn't get accounts. Our very survival meant that we married someone, right? And now that has shifted where women are very capable of doing all the things. So that means I chose to be with you because I wanted to be with you, not necessarily out of a financial need like before. So maybe that trust might be a little harder that forgiveness might be a little harder to swallow for somebody and forgiving themselves because I chose you. It
Yeah.
wasn't like back in the day where, you were married because you had to be, you married because you really wanted to be.
Right.
Does that make sense? So that forgiveness might be a little bit more difficult because is it saying something about how I choose, how I pick? Like, what's wrong with me that I couldn't see that you would be this type of person that would do this to me? So I don't know. It might be a little heavier and why somebody would have a difficult time with forgiving themselves
Yeah.
because they feel like they chose wrong.
And also, if they have a history of trauma, that is all coming back too, right? There's something there's a deficit with me.
Yeah.
But it's not, it's too overwhelming to think about it like that. So I must behave in ways that demonstrate that you're not trustworthy. You're still this way. Not that I deficit in me, meaning there isn't a deficit in you, but you feel that way. But that's too heavy to think about and process, and even forgive yourself for not seeing something that you wouldn't have any control over. You wouldn't have any control over this person's choice to cheat. So how could you have known? You wouldn't have known. And even to go with what Tiffany said, everything is going great, right? Everything looks great. Everything feels great. We are jiving. Everything is going fine. And we are making plans. We even are setting goals. We are even trying to accomplish some of those things. And this happened. And how did I miss it? And so, because I feel like forgiveness and trust are two sides of the same coin. And so, if you don't trust, I'm questioning, have you really forgiven? And if you can't forgive, it's hard to begin to build trust.
Mm. Ooh, that's what I was getting ready to say. Yeah. How can you move forward without that? Yeah.
Got it.
Although it takes time, it will take time. Yeah. And just really quick, so when somebody is rebuilding trust, just wanted to kind of point out that it's going to be okay if it seems like the betrayed partner, some days it might feel like you're going backwards. Some days you might feel like everything is good and you wake up and intrusive thoughts come again and you feel like you're backwards and the person is asking you again, why did you do that? Or what was so different about them, right? That is, unfortunately, that's what comes with the rebuilding of the trust. That's what's coming with moving forward. So that is something that is going to be a normal part of the process. So when you see that pop up over and over again, you have to be patient. You have to be understanding that this person has a deep wound that they're trying to seal up. So you have to validate their emotion and be patient. You
And I
can't
love
just
that
say,
because
"Oh, it's been 3 years and you still talking about that. How many times I gotta ask you to forgive me?" I thought, here we go again. We still talking about that, and we are, okay. And so you may run into that. So be prepared for that,
Mhm.
but also be patient with that. You have to remember, if you were the one that created or caused the offense, you have
Yeah.
to understand the damage of the aftermath.
So 100% agree with you, but I will offer this too. In those moments, you also need to be honest with what put you there, what was the trigger, what
Yeah.
was going on. You can't just treat me like, and put me in the doghouse and don't talk to me about what happened
Mhm.
that put you in that headspace again,
Yeah.
right? Was it something I'm doing? Was it something you watched on TV? Was it the song that you listened to that put you in that mood?
Mhm.
But you can't just treat me a certain way
Yeah.
or throw it up in my face and not help me to understand where we are or what's going on with you. And so I just ask that people are always honest when they're going through
That's
that
good.
recovery or that journey to healing, that you really have to be vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
and that's both parties, with how you're feeling. And the person that has been betrayed already feels exposed and vulnerable as it is because they were betrayed. But I need you to still stay in that space to be able to share so that you all can continue that healing process as well.
Yeah, so sharing the triggers.
Trigger, yeah.
Yeah, so knowing what the triggers are and sharing them.
Yeah.
Or catching yourself in that rumination or catching yourself in
Yes.
all of those thoughts and saying, this is what I'm going through right now. Can you help me to move past this? I think
Yes.
that's important. I think that a lot of times, what from my understanding, when you have the spouse that has been betrayed, they're willing to tell you that, hey, this is triggering me, or hey, this is what I'm in. But they don't have, the other person is not willing to sit with them in that.
Yeah.
And I think that is a cost
Yes.
for your infidelity, is that
Yes.
sometimes, it's like Tiffany was saying, sometimes I feel great and other times I don't. So the cost of those days when I don't feel my best and I'm sitting here with this and I'm telling you I'm sitting here with this, you should join me in it and say, whatever it is that you need to say to help me move through it, not
Yep.
to avoid it, not to shut me down, but to help me move through it because you caused it.
Yeah, right. Right.
Right.
So I got to work through this all by myself.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And it has to be a shared experience, right? They have to go through it together. And I love that, right? Because I feel like one of the things that when I used to work with people with depression, it's one of those things where you got to move and you got to move through it. You cannot just sit there. You have to keep going through. So it's tough periods. You're going to have to move, and moving through it is really important because she or he may be, having this bad day, and you're like, you know what, call me tomorrow, or I'll see you tomorrow, or, you avoid them the whole day. That's not going to work.
Right.
You both, if you both are committed to this relationship healing, then you have to be there in that space with them, like you said,
Mhm. That's
to get to that other side.
We talked about repair being possible.
Mhm.
People can actually move past betrayal. How does that look on the other side of it? What does that look like?
So I can only share with some of the couples that I work with, and really it's about them being and having clear boundaries, expectations,
Mhm.
them having open communication with each other. But oftentimes there is a strength that comes as a result of them working through this and sticking, like really doing the work, not just, staying together for the sake of the kids or staying together for what, just because, but literally doing the work. They are stronger on the other side. They have better communication, more intimacy. And I'm not talking about physical intimacy, intimacy where they can be vulnerable, where they can share their deepest, darkest, whatever, and be okay with that.
I love that.
And it will take some time to reconnect intimately, to
Yes.
restore the emotional intimacy and the physical intimacy to the space. So that also takes time, but it also takes intentionality. And there's something also through therapy that you can explore if you feel like you are dealing with this or currently navigating this space, is doing the work through sensate focus. And so that is learning intimacy through non-sexual touching, but
Mhm.
learning how to re-experience each other all over again, learning how to explore each other all over again. And eventually, once that is restored, it will lead back to the engaging in sexual pleasures.
Yeah. And it just reminds me, it's dating your partner again too, like
Yes.
really, really rekindling the relationship, creating space for the relationship.
Yes.
right? Because oftentimes we get busy with our careers, we get busy with our kids, we get busy with whatever. And the one thing that is neglected is the relationship. And so putting that first again and rekindling that is important. And committing to that as well as some self-care, right? You got to have some time for yourself, but having committed time to work on the relationship is also important.
That's good. Yep. Okay. All right. So in closing, because I know we can go on and on, this topic is so broad, so we may have to do a part two. But in closing today, what would you leave the audience with in regards to this topic? And we'll start with you, Chandra.
Oh, so for me, part of the reason why I wanted to come and talk about it is because I believe there's a myth that affairs or infidelity is the end of a relationship. And I just wanted to say that there is hope on the other side. And oftentimes that the couple can come out if they are willing to do the hard work.
That's good.
They can come out on the other side a lot stronger, more committed, more clear about their relationship than they were even when they initiated. Because yes, the relationship does die. Let me go back. When you have an affair, the relationship that you once knew is dead. And now you have an opportunity with some of that to create the relationship that you desire with that person. And so it can be revitalized, it can be fulfilling, it can be all of the things that you want it to be if you're willing to do the work.
That's good. Okay, Aaliyah.
I think that coming from my lens, I think that what I would leave everybody with is having the hard conversations before you get into these relationships, knowing your values, knowing where they stack up compared to your partner, knowing your framework, your relationship blueprint based off of your childhood, being self-aware of your own stuff so that when things do happen, because I'm not saying that affairs will happen, but things will happen in marriage. You just stay married long enough, there's going to be tests and trials that come to kind of try to tear that marriage apart. That's just reality. But like you said, Chandra, marriages are resilient. They can bounce back even better and stronger. But I believe the foundation is the key to that. And a big part of that is being self-aware and having those hard conversations prior to even getting into these situations. Do not get married just because you love him. That is my main thing that I say to people. Please do not get married to him just because you love him, because it's going to take more than, human love to sustain a marriage. It's a different type of love that you have to commit to. And that
Yes.
love is something that we don't even begin to comprehend, because that's a God love that sustains a marriage. So it has to be more than I love him or I love her to get married. So yeah, that's what I believe.
Yeah. All right. And want to ditto what Aaliyah said, Chandra. It has been a pleasure having you on the show today. So thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be with us. And one thing I would like to leave the audience with is love your person, right? Truly focus on what it means to love somebody and love them with your heart, love them with the love of God, and remember that we are constantly evolving. Who you married 5 years ago is not who you're with today. So that's taking time to be intentional about studying your mate, studying your spouse, so that we can adapt to those changes, being able to communicate to each other what it is that you need in this current season. And it may change again next month, but that's okay as long as your communication is open and is clear. And remember the vows that you made to each other when you said, I do. When you stood before God, your family, and everybody else and said that. What did that mean when you said for better or for worse? In sickness and in health, right? Focus on what that really means. Zone in on your person. If you both give each other 100%, then nobody would be unfulfilled, right? Or there shouldn't be any time for anybody else if you're truly giving your person what they need. It would not leave time for anything else.
Yeah.
So I love, love each other, and make the world a better place. Thank you for tuning in, and see you soon. All right.